Al McCoy passing away, and it wouldn't be a remembrance program if we couldn't give you at least a little taste of what it sounded like with Al. Let me see here.
And this one is over. Suns win. The Suns win. And the Suns win number 63 on the year. A new Phoenix Suns record as they win the ball game over the Lakers 121 to 110.
I remember that, and it was even sweeter that it was over the Lakers too, right? Yeah, isn't that great? Here's this.
The reaction that I have gotten from sightless people, and
that is something to me that I always found amazing. Joining us in the studio right now is the national treasure, that is Pat McMahon, Arizona TV and radio legend. It is an honor, first of all, for me. I know you've spoken with Joe numerous times.
I'm sorry.
This is the first time you and I have been on the air together, as far as I know.
It's my pleasure. I listen all the time, and I can't think of a better reason to be here as long as we have to talk about a giant like Al passing. I can't think of a better reason, though, than to do him the kind of honors that have been bestowed on him through the entire weekend and for some time to come.
So one of the things you just heard him mention, the reaction that he gets from sightless people, and it struck me that being in radio, you always think of who's listening somewhere else. But years ago, I had a gentleman who told me that he looked forward to my show every day. Well, that's really nice to hear, whatever. And then he told me, he says, and I've been blind my whole life, and he says, and I love hearing you. And I thought, the connection is different. It really is, because the voice is your outlet to someone else. And I always felt like great storytellers on the radio, especially play-by-play, the storytelling, they become a part of my family. They become a part of what's so important in what's around me, and painting that picture of life outside of what I can see in my bedroom or my car or wherever I am at the time. And Pat, you've been a part of that. And of course you saw him do it.
Haven't we, all of us, truly, without getting sappy, considered the fact that this is such an incredible honor to be able to communicate with people here and Kingman, and
Yes.
and many people out at Blythe, California, and Silver City, New Mexico, to be able to do that, and then to find out that you are the only communicator for the people who are sightless, and those folks who are otherwise involved with radio as the only communications device they have because they're in a wheelchair,
right?
Because of the fact that they are immobile for whatever reason, and we get to be the connection.
It is an incredible honor, but also there's a responsibility to it. And Al, like so many great sports broadcasters, told stories and brought life to all of us, right? I mean, we were in the arena. If Al was in the arena, we were in the arena, right?
And as Joe knows, because, of course, he's much older than both of us, but Joe and Chris and those who have been here for a short period of time or who were raised here, they know that when they stop you on the street, as they did with Al so often, and I've been fortunate because I've done so much television, when they stop you on the street, and the first thing they say is either, hey, I listen to you every day on KTAR, or, hey, I was the kid in the third row, and Wallace and Ladmo and you said, we're giving away a Ladmo bag now, and it went to the guy next to me. Now, this may be a 65-year-old bank president.
Yeah.
And he never forgot. But see, that part of it meant that I, on the Wallace and Ladmo show that was 36 years on the air, 30 with me, I got to not only communicate, but I got to make people laugh. Got to do comedy every day, live, not just for kids, but mom and dad usually just kind of hung around in the back and say, oh, wait a minute, hold it. I get that stuff.
Legacy. When you hear that word and you think about your friend, Al McCoy, his name is on our wall out there. Your name is on that wall out there. What comes to mind when you hear legacy and you think about Al McCoy?
Oh, how fortunate it is for us in this business to last as long as we have and still be invited back to shows like this and to be on Channel 7 as I am and to be doing the God Show on the Dave Pratt Network and those things. To be allowed to continue to do things that you love doing and that you're welcome in people's cars and that you're welcome in people's lives as Al was. Vin Scully, Chick Hearn, giants who lasted all that time and still were not as legendary from the standpoint of the length of time with one team, because nobody else was. That was Al.
Yeah.
Al and I actually met before virtually anybody else met Al, at least anybody currently in broadcasting. And if I have a couple of minutes to tell you this story, that when I came to town, I was right out of the Army. And so it was May of 1960. And a guy said, hey, listen, you've been in entertainment in the Army and you've just traveled around doing shows because nobody really wanted you to be on our side in the military. so all you could do is entertain. That's fine. But where are you going to go now? That Phoenix, Arizona in May looked awful good.
Yeah.
And you jump in a pool, you get rid of the khaki. And so I came down here just to relax a little bit and decided, wait a minute, this really is a beautiful place and a lot of radio stations, a lot of television stations. How about if I just simply go around and see how much in demand a short Irishman might be?
Yeah.
And I passed out my resume. And I was in a television station lobby, and out the door in May of 1960 comes Al McCoy. Of course, I had no idea who he was, but yet he came over, as Al was prone to do, and say, hi, I don't know you. Who are you and why are you here and what's going on?
I love that.
Well, Mr. Public Relations, anyway.
Yeah.
And so we began to chat, and suddenly we realized, oh, well, where did you come from, and then what about your home? And found out that we both had deep connections to Iowa. He grew up in Williams, Iowa. It's a very small agricultural town, and went to Drake University in Des Moines. It happens that as we chatted, we realized that while he was at Drake University, I was at Dowling Catholic Prep Boys School.
Also in Des Moines?
In Des Moines, about 2 miles down the road. My parents were in show business, and so they were on the road. And at the time, I had been homeschooled, so it was time finally for me to find out what a classroom looked like. And so I went there. I was boarding on campus. And then he told me that he worked his way through Drake playing piano for a lot of the bands around. And I knew some of the bands, and I asked him, like who? And then he told me. I said, Keith Killinger. Really? Tell me about that. We found out in the lobby of the television station that he played piano in the band that played for my senior prom.
Oh!
That's how far back I go with Al McCoy.
Pat McMahon.
Joining us to pay tribute to Al McCoy, who passed away Saturday at the ripe old age of 91, is his friend Jeff Munn. And I know he had a long, wonderful life, but I wish we could have kept him around longer, Jeff.
Boy, I agree with you, Jamie. And it's I've been telling people all weekend, and I did know kind of what the circumstances were a few weeks ago. And you can tell yourself, and this is true in a lot of situations in life, you can tell yourself you're ready for something. And then when the news hits, you realize, no, I'm not ready.
You became a broadcaster in high school, high school kid here in Phoenix.
Yes.
And so you looked up to Al McCoy from the very start.
Yeah, my remembrances of Al McCoy go back. I wish I could say I could remember him when he did ASU games or Phoenix Giants games, but it was the Roadrunners. And the ironic thing, and Al told me this years later, before he did hockey, he had never done anything hockey related on the radio. And I tell you, as a kid who grew up here, he was brilliant on hockey. And so when he got the Suns job, my first thought was, they're putting the hockey guy on basketball. And then we found out, like that, he's even better at basketball.
Yeah. And stayed in that job for 51 years. Did Al feel like it was an amazing run for him as well as all of us who thought?
Yeah. The thing, and I've thought about this, is I've thought about Al for quite a while. I don't think of the broadcaster. I think of the man. And he had such incredible humility in an industry where, and we've encountered, all three of us have encountered people like this. We run into people who would run over their grandmother in the street to get to a job. Yeah. Al, no ego. No. None. He was always more concerned with you than he was with him.
And he was a longtime family friend of yours as well. Tell us about his piano playing, though. He was brilliant on the piano.
Great piano player, loved jazz. He always said his favorite jazz pianist was Errol Garner. My kids, and it's funny, Al was 91. My children are 60-plus years younger than him. They were upset when they got the news. When my son was 2 or 3 years old, I used to bring him to the office at the arena occasionally, right into Al's office, and I'd go do whatever I had to do, and I'd come back, and there would be Patrick sitting there across from Al at his desk, and they'd just be chatting, and Patrick was 2. He couldn't quite form sentences. Al didn't mind. And Al, from that point on, Patrick was Al's guy.
Oh, that's so cool. I feel very blessed that my then 9-year-old was able to meet Al McCoy at a Fiesta Bowl breakfast before the parade where he was a grand marshal, and I have that picture forever.
If I can just say two things, because I can see the clock. I do this show. You guys got to stay on time.
We know.
They always say the phrase, we'll never see his like again. This time they're right. This industry has become so specialized. We're not asked to do more than what we're assigned to do at this radio station. Al came from an era where he did everything.
List that, because you did in that special piece we played earlier this morning.
He was a rock and roll disc jockey, and I'm going to mess up the clock. I'm sorry.
That's
One
all right.
of the stories he told me was when he was the program director at KRUX, which was a top 40 station, he would get calls from record promoters. One of the promoters that he would talk with weekly was a fella named Dick Clark. Can you imagine a phone conversation between Al McCoy and Dick Clark?
That's amazing.
He did news, obviously all the different sports that he did as a play-by-play announcer. We're in an era of specialization in broadcasting, and we will not see his like again.
No, we won't. I'm so blessed I got to work with him for a few years.
Yeah, me too. And by the way, you're kind of like Al in that sense. You've done sports, you've done news.
If you can link me with that, that's the highest compliment I could get. Thank you.
All right, you deserve it.
We appreciate you.
I hesitate to do this only because this could turn into a real mess very quickly. But I want to talk to Jeff Munn.
Yes, sir.
Sad weekend is the understatement of all understatements. With the news, I would say this. Let me give you my perspective first. The news of the passing of Al McCoy was much sadder to me personally than I thought it was going to be. But also knowing what he's endured for the last year or so.
Yes.
There is a sense of relief that is no longer, because he was a very proud man,
yes,
that he is no longer suffering any of those things.
And I take, as a man of faith, I take great comfort in knowing that he and Georgia, his beloved wife, are together again, and they will never be separated again. You talk about, and this is a little behind the scenes as to what happened on Saturday. We had the ASU football game. I was about to do the halftime show, and just as we were going into the halftime show, we got word of the Suns announcement, and I immediately thought, we need to acknowledge this on the air. We need to let people know, but everybody else with the radio broadcast is in Lubbock, Texas, and I was frantically trying to get a hold of our producer. He was not available until the last commercial break before the last halftime segment. And 10 seconds before we came back on the air, I was told, our producer said, yes, go ahead and do it. I had like 10 seconds to gather my thoughts.
Yeah.
It was the longest 3 minutes I've spent in 45 years on radio. And I was supposed to go 4. And I got through 3, and I realized I can't talk anymore. Mm-hmm. And I just pitched it to a commercial break.
When the news came out that the late Senator John McCain was suffering with brain cancer, I had to do the same thing. I went on the air in the morning. I was doing early mornings then. And he was such a good friend that I didn't realize it was going to strike me as personally as it did.
Yeah.
And it was. I don't know if people understand. It's hard to deal with an emotion and then to do what we do and try to still sound professional and not stumble and bumble but the same thing this weekend when I got the word, like many of us did behind the scenes, it was so strange how it hit me the way it did, because all I could think about was how good he had always been to me. The broadcasting stuff speaks for itself, but
Yes.
he was so good to me when he didn't need to be.
It's the man
Yeah.
that we're thinking of. And yeah, you're right. A lot of people will focus on the broadcast accomplishments, and there are many, and they should. But for those of us who got to know him, it's the man that we think about.
Well, he was ill for quite a while and going through treatment and things, and the public didn't know about it. He didn't want them to know about it. And we had asked him on a number of occasions, would you be willing to do the podcast? And he reached out to me and said, I would love to do the podcast. Just I want to make sure I'm looking and feeling as good as I can. But he still honored that commitment and did at a time when he knew he was still hurting, he was just such a gracious person. Matter of fact, Julia was able to spend some time with him. She actually made sure she got him home. And tough stuff, man.
And that podcast, I listened to that, and I mentioned this morning with Jim and Jamie, and I don't mind repeating myself on this because you also did a podcast recently with our friend Pat McMahon.
Yeah.
These gentlemen, who are both huge mentors to me professionally and personally, also come from an era of our industry that is just very quickly fading away. Mm-hmm. Al and Pat were both two of the most, Pat is one of the most versatile broadcasters I've ever been around. And Al was just as versatile. He could do anything. He could do news. He was a rock and roll DJ. I told this story this morning, and I'll repeat it. When he was the program director at KRUX, which is a top 40 station in the 60s, this market had two top 40 stations battling each other constantly. Al was the program director at KRUX, and he would get calls weekly from record promoters. Hey, I'd like you to play my group's record. One of those promoters was Dick Clark.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a phone conversation between Al McCoy and Dick Clark? I mean, I wish I had a tape of it. But this is just an example, and I'm sorry to go so long on it. We're in an era of specialization. You're a talk show host. I'm a news guy. I do other things besides news. But so many of us in this industry are locked into one thing because of the demands of the industry. And so when we lose people like Al McCoy, it's really the close of a chapter in our own vocation.
Yeah.
Because you will not find... you'll never find another guy like Al McCoy again who could do so many things in this industry and do them all brilliantly.
One of the favorite stories was Jerry Colangelo explaining at the beginning days of the Phoenix Suns, his office was a little desk and a telephone under the arena, and they were hiring for the in-game announcer. And I know you know the story.
Yes.
And a guy brings a resume in and didn't get the job. And it was Al Michaels. Al Michaels.
Yeah.
Applied to be the in-arena announcer for the Suns and didn't get the job.
Yeah, and it was because he was too young. He ended up going to work for Chick Hearn, and he also worked for Chuck Barris for a while. Yeah. I know you got to get under other things. I also want to say this today to all of our listeners, to all of the sports fans that are within the sound of our voices. Think about how blessed we are in this market.
Yeah.
We've had Al McCoy. We have Dave Pasch, Greg Schulte, Gary Bender, a national sportscaster, did the Cardinals on radio for a number of years. We had Tom Dillon, still for my money.
We got Ron Wolfley.
We got Wolf. We've got Tim Healy. This market has had some incredible talent doing play-by-play. And I wonder sometimes if sports fans in this market know how good they've had it.
They do when they leave.
Unfortunately, that's when it dawns on them.
They do when they get somewhere else.
And I listened to Dave and Wolf yesterday at the start of the Cardinal game, and I know Chris Garagiola did a great tribute Saturday night to Al. Dave and Ron are two of my very good friends, and I thought they handled it brilliantly, and Dave is every bit as classy as Al McCoy is, and I thought he just handled it so well.
So, somber weekend.
Yeah.
Al McCoy passed away, and man, I'll tell you, I think it's one of those things where, my goodness, you've watched and listened to this guy for so many years, 51 years with the Suns.
There are people out there listening who have literally grown up with Al McCoy as the voice of the Suns for them. I mean, the vast majority of Suns fans.
And I think we got to celebrate the man. I think, for a day or so, we were he was in his 90s. He lived a really good
91,
life.
yeah.
But I think, today is a day that we should celebrate him. Hey, Pablo, give me some Al McCoy.
Crowder waiting with it, lobs it underneath. Yes! It's good. DeAndre Ayton scores the basket over the rim and in. This one is history. Suns win it. The players are out on the floor. The Suns come away with the victory.
There's a couple from Al McCoy, one of the all-time greats. I got a great Al McCoy story.
I'm sure you do.
So you've never heard this story?
I have no idea what you're about to say.
Okay. So, I've known Al for a long time. I mean, he's one of those guys, and you know this too. You could just go up to him and start talking. He's not bigger than anybody. He never liked that. He wasn't, oh, you can't come up to me and do it. No. He wanted to talk to everybody, right?
I would say this, when he came into the radio station, you had to elbow other people out of the way to kind of get in and get your time with Al. He could shut the place down.
So listen to this story. You ready?
Yeah.
The year, Bruce, is 2011. I even have the exact date, March 23rd.
Okay.
I take my wife, who wasn't my wife all those years ago.
Pre-wife.
First date.
Okay.
We had our first date at a little place called Tutti Santi. That's right near the radio station.
I'm familiar with it.
Great Italian restaurant. And I had asked her out to dinner. And that's where we were going to go for our first date. So I get off the air. I'm a little bit nervous.
A little nervous, right?
A little nervous because I like this girl.
Well, and you're batting way over your average already. I can tell you that.
Way over my head, right? And so we meet at Tutti Santi. And so we sit down and we're having terrific conversation. Order, a drink, and we're getting to know each other, and some appetizers, and things are going well. And I'm thinking, this is a good first date. This is a really good first date.
You're killing it.
We had some entrees, and then we had dessert. And I'm getting to Al McCoy in a second. We had dessert. And I decided to feed her dessert.
Oh,
I don't know what happened. It was like,
really?
I've never used the move, and the move just happened.
Really?
And I
That's
started.
Bold on a first date.
It was really bold.
Okay.
And so I'm feeding her dessert, and I'm like, I think
this is going well.
I think this is going really, really well. Gosh, if there was just a way that, we could really cap the night off and make it truly special.
Okay, I'm really worried where it's going.
So after I fed her dessert, we get up from the restaurant, and I look across the way. Al McCoy's sitting there having dinner. And I'm like, I know this girl's a Suns fan. She had season tickets.
Ooh.
Big-time fan.
Okay.
And I'm like, in my head, I go, that dessert move was pretty good.
It's a pretty solid move.
But if I introduce her to Al McCoy, this could get even better. So I said, to her, there's my friend Al McCoy.
Yes.
You know Al McCoy? I go, I know Al McCoy. She said, I'm the biggest Al McCoy fan. I've been a Suns fan since I was a kid here. And I said, well, let's go over and say hello. And in my head, I'm like, oh, God, I hope he remembers my name. So I'm wondering, do I go over and say, hey, it's me, Gatos?
Yeah.
Just to see.
Make sure you get it in.
Yeah. So we go over, and I said, Al, it's great to see you. And he stood up, and he goes, Gatos, it's nice to see you, too. I'm shaking his hand. And I said, this is my so-and-so. And And I said, it's our first date.
Oh, boy.
And he goes, well, he's quite a catch.
Yes.
He's playing along.
Yes.
He's playing along. I'm like, Al, she should probably go on a second date with me. And Al's there's, I think you absolutely should, young lady, go on a second date with this man. He's something else. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh,
laying it on.
So we left he was so nice. We left the restaurant. It was good to see him. And she's like, I've always wanted to meet Al McCoy. What I'm thinking, and of course I married this girl now.
Yes,
she's the Gato's bride. I'm thinking, like, when she went home, was she thinking about me or Al McCoy?
Ooh, there is a
right.
Well, yeah.
And I can honestly,
because if you'd have left on the dessert, I'd have said she was thinking
me.
You.
But Al McCoy
probably topped the dessert as good as it is.
Exactly, I totally agree. And so after that, I always told Al, I said, you're probably the reason I married that girl. I said, without Al McCoy at Tutti Santi at that great restaurant, maybe a second date. She could have thought, I can't believe he's feeding me dessert. This is the gall. This guy thinks he's
the
like
audacity.
Walks on water. He could just feed me dessert. But then, he knows Al McCoy. Maybe I will go on a second date.
I'll let him feed me dessert if that's what it all takes.
So I always told Al, I go, I probably wouldn't be married if not for you. And he always got a kick out of it.
Yeah.
And we're going to play that. I actually asked him about this on the air. We're going to play that like 30 seconds on what he saw that night.
Okay.
5 o'clock.
His version of
His version.
Okay, which I hope doesn't vary too much from yours.
Well, you never know.
Okay,
I like to build things up pretty good.
There is that.
But, it was... Listen, it was just a cool moment. He was sitting there, and can you imagine the number of people that would come up to him all the time?
Constantly.
And you know what? Always polite, always warm, always welcoming.
Well, warm. And I really think that is a wonderful word to describe Al McCoy. For those of you who didn't have the pleasure of meeting him, take it from the two of us. Yeah. And by the way, everybody else who's ever met him, warm. He's a genuinely warm person.
Yeah.
He had a beautiful style about him.
He was so good, too, man. I mean, when you listen to Al McCoy, there really wasn't a better basketball play-by-play announcer. And
you listen to a lot of people today, and I'm not saying they're doing Al McCoy impersonations. Yeah. I'm saying you can hear the influence.
I think so, too. And even when the Suns were bad, and of course they had bad seasons in his 51 years, there were people that still said, I can't wait to listen to Al McCoy.
Right.
It was one of those things. It was comfort.
Even
it was
back
excitement.
To the madhouse on McDowell.
Yeah.
Come on.
I mean, there were people that would turn their TVs down and play the radio. And that's unheard of in this day and age now, because there's so many different outlets of how you listen or watch a broadcast. But can you imagine turning off the TV sound and piping in McCoy because you wanted to hear the best?
You want to hear the best in it.
But you wanted to watch it, too.
Well, and he had a relationship with the audience.
He did.
But he also had a relationship with the players. And you can't not have one as much as you're around them. Can I share something that Rex Chapman put down?
Yes.
The crime dog.
Yes.
He said Al was like a second dad or an extra granddad to a lot of us. He traveled with us, ate with us, drank with us, told him stop complaining at the refs, hugged us, and loved us. And we loved him back.
Yeah. Yeah, he was beloved here. He always will be. He always will be loved here. Just a household name and a heck of a life. We're going to talk to the new voice of the Suns, John Bloom, at 5.
Yeah.
Bloomer and I went to college at Syracuse together, and Bloom wanted to be, when we were kids, he wanted to be the Suns play-by-play announcer.
He's literally living his dream.
He is. But somebody like Al McCoy passing the torch to John Bloom,
big deal.